it's so important for the human condition, and it's such an unbelievably available resource here in America. And yet people would rather go on TikTok.
That's right.
It's such a hard thing to encourage too, because it requires discipline. And if you're not raised with discipline, if it's not incorporated into you very early, it takes a monumental shift in the way you think about life to incorporate that.
How do you do that with your children?
Well, fortunately, my kids have been around me when I've been, during the time that they're alive. I've been at my most disciplined and most best. Thank God they weren't around me when I was 21.
Right.
And they're seeing the example of someone who works hard and works all the time and has a lot of discipline and also wants to talk to them about things. And I want to talk to them about the value of difficult things and about failure and about like sports. They're involved in sports, which I think are very important to kids. You certainly can develop assholes through sports, but I think there's something about winning and losing and effort and reward for that effort that's a vital part of being a human being. And through that, through sports and through any difficult thing, you develop your human potential. I think you only find it through struggle. You only find it through a difficult thing to acquire or a difficult thing to accomplish, and then doing that and recognizing that your boundaries are actually movable. And that the boundaries that hold you back now are not permanent.
That's right.
They speak to your state at the moment, but that state, you can advance that state, and you can do things to make your perspective more nuanced and enhance it, and hopefully they can learn from that. But there's also the problem that they're growing up in a loving household. They're growing up, the examples they have is people that are very kind and nice, and I think you do need to be exposed to a certain amount of assholes to understand the full scope of human beings.
No question. And I feel so much of, my job as a father is creating this kind of adversity in my kid's life. I have to, and I need my children to learn the lessons that I've learned. I just really can't have them learn it the way that I learned it, because that it could have gone either way.
Yeah. And most of the time, it doesn't go the way you went.
That's right.
Yeah, it's like if you get 100 kids and you thrust them into horrible environments, very few of them come out to be this person who has forged themselves through the fire of adversity. Most people succumb. Unfortunately,
I think that's right, and I think most people also don't have. I mean, look, I mean, through all the trouble and all the shit that I got into, I had a loving, supporting family who had my back, and I think that's when I think about the inequality in this country. I mean, one of the main themes and what I'm trying to do with this podcast is just I've seen firsthand how the legal system, how so many of the systems that are in place, people who don't have that infrastructure, it is so grossly fucking unfair.
And they don't have an example to go off of. One of the things about human beings is we imitate our atmosphere.
That's right.
And we become accustomed to seeing people work hard, achieve things, and people that are kind and ethical and honest. And we look at that as like, that's a value that I want to aspire to achieve. And if you don't have that around you, and all you have around you is crime and drug-ridden streets and gang violence, and you don't know any other way to think or behave. You don't have an example of it, and there's very little effort done to change those neighborhoods. I mean, if you look at the amount of effort and the amount of resources that we pump into other countries, we pump into the military, we pump into all these various things, we always seem to have money for it. Imagine if you're a child and you're being raised in this community that it's essentially been the same way for decades and decades with no help.
That's right.
You feel like an outsider, and you feel like the system is rigged. Absolutely. In many ways, it is.
It is. I couldn't agree with that.
Yeah,
more. I couldn't agree with that more. And I think in terms of our children, it's how do you get to them to see that, understand that, experience it a little bit, but also understand those inequities and try to inspire them to do something about it. And I think for me it's just, again, people talk about like masculinity and this term that gets thrown around all the time, like this toxic masculinity and whatever the fuck that means. And I just think that, again, it's like, what are the examples that we're putting forward, and what are the examples of people, as fathers? What kind of men are you surrounding yourself by? What are the things that are important to you? And I think it's not, to me at least, it's not, some sort of rejection of these classically masculine traits. I think that, having the ability and understanding you have the responsibility to keep your family safe is absolutely essential in being a man and in providing. I think having a healthy relationship with violence, having an understanding of it. I think teaching your kids to have a relationship with violence where they're not being ruled by fear or shame, but they can have some sort of understanding, some sort of they can touch it, they understand it a little bit, they know what they're doing. I think it's essential. And I also think, being accepting, being kind, being open, being generous, being empathetic are also, part of being a man. And I think that, oftentimes, because so many of the people I think who are kind of leading the charge and who have, so much, sort of have so much of the platform at their disposal, are kind of leading in these sort of toxic ways where it's all a bunch of bombast and bullshit. And to me, it's been my experience, folks who really know what they're doing in that world, really don't need to, show off about it at all.
Right, the people that are high achievers, they don't really have to beat their own chest and
I think that's right.
blow their own horn.
I think that's right.
Yeah, what we think of as toxic masculinity is really a bunch of losers. So a lot of it is like the worst example. But you could get the same, there's no term toxic femininity, right? But there's toxic human beings, and some of them happen to be male, and some of them happen to be female. But it's not an indictment on male,
Right.
The male gender of the species. That's
Right.
Crazy.
Right.
And the idea that you don't need men, that somehow or another, like, the female is the future. It's like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. You need a balance. There's a yin and a yang in this life for a reason.
That's right.
All of it goes together.
That's right.
It's just everybody has to do better.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I've really, on this thing that I'm trying to do. I'm really just trying to put up examples of that, men and women who again really walk that walk and are not leading with sort of just, and trying to give whatever platform I have to those kinds of people who are real examples of that.